Sure, God can perform a miracle and stop the sun. How many times has he done that? Only once in history. So I have a reasonable expectation that the sun will come up, but the unbeliever has actually zero expectation that the sun will come up because theirs is based on a viciously circular argument.
I think you actually mean that he stopped the Earth from rotating, not he stopped the sun.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's a technicality.
But yeah, it's a technicality that shows how demonstrably stupid what you just said was. And it comes in 3 tiers, saving the best for last. Tier 1. The Earth rotates, well, once in 24 hours. That means in a day, in this frame of reference, if you were standing on the poles, you haven't moved at all. However, if you're on the equator, that means that you've moved about 24,000 miles in 24 hours. That's about 1,000 miles an hour, give or take half of that at the temperate latitudes where Si says these people were when God stopped the Earth. Now, people tend not to notice that 500 miles an hour because the Earth is rotating with them. However, if someone were to stop the Earth, as Si says is technically correct, then you would notice that 500 miles an hour very quickly indeed. I mean, just to give you a little perspective on this, the US performed a test of a phantom jet hitting a wall used for a nuclear reactor at 500 miles an hour to test its physical properties. Yep, Si, I think if God did technically stop the Earth, as you said, it would have been a far more effective way and a far quicker way of wiping out life on Earth than that flood thing. Tier 2. But to truly stop the sun in the sky, you also need to stop the Earth in its orbit, and this is where the numbers get really silly. You see, the Earth orbits the sun at some 30 kilometers per second, but let's deal in multiples of the speed of sound, just for convenience. When technically the Earth stops rotating, that means that everyone at the temperate latitudes will all of a sudden be doing this, but at about 10 times faster. That's at about the speed of sound. Or this if they actually manage to hit a wall. The guys on the North and South Pole, of course, won't even notice, but hey. However, if the Earth stops in its orbit, that means that everyone on this side of the Earth will fly off into space at about 90 times the speed of sound. At that speed, you would clear the atmosphere in about 3 seconds, and those will be the lucky ones. The guys on the trailing edge of the Earth would form some fairly convincing craters filled with something along the lines of chunky salsa in about 60 microseconds. Give or take, that's about 1,000 times faster than you can blink your eye. But let's just ignore the ballistics for a second here and say that God somehow magically enabled the inertial dampers.
Inertial dampers failing. We're losing attitude control.
And remind ourselves why God was doing this. Joshua therefore came upon them suddenly and went up from Gilgal all night. And the Lord discomfited them before Israel and slew them with great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them a long way up that goeth to Bethron, and smote them to Azekal, and unto Makkedah. Yep, that's right, Joshua is killing people for his God. And it came to pass, as they fled before Israel, and were going down to Bethron, that the Lord cast great stones from heaven on them unto Azekah, and they died. There were more which died with hailstones than they who died of Israel slew with the sword. Yep, that's right. God manages to kill more than the Israelites through the inspired military and technological genius of throwing rocks at them.
Oh, lay off, we haven't started yet.
Rocks. Then spake Joshua unto the Lord in the day, when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, and thou still upon Gibeon, and thou, moon, in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jashar? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hastened not to go down about a whole day. Now, Inara, tell us something interesting about people.
We're fragile creatures. It takes less than a pound of pressure to cut skin.
Even Darth Vader understood a thing or two about the efficiency of force.
Enough to find the rebels' hidden fort.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Enough of this. Vader, release him.
As you wish.
However, God, having failed to slaughter enough people by throwing rocks at them, For him to then stop the earth in its orbit such that Joshua can continue with this bloody slaughter has got to be the most inefficient application of military force ever. And this is the third tier. I mean, just to convey how utterly strategically stupid this is a Saturn V rocket. It's about 500 tons, 450 of which are fuel. And that could get several tons to the moon and return about 1% of that mass, that's about 5 tons, to Earth. Now, rocket fuel has about the same energy density as high explosive. And in a perfectly efficient system, it turns out that to stop 1 ton of the Earth in its orbit, that is to take it from 90 times the speed of sound and stop it dead, requires about 100 tons of high explosive. Oh yeah, there's a lot of energy in the Earth orbiting the Sun. The practical upshot is for God to stop the Earth in its tracks, as Sai thinks he did. He expended about the same energy as 100 times the Earth's mass in high explosives. And this is directly after the verse where God is trying to kill these people by throwing stones at these fleeing people. And even at that, he only manages to kill slightly more people than the bloodthirsty mob of religious savages perpetrating their religious genocide. Interestingly enough, though, while Sai has no problem with this barbaric slaughter in the name of his religion, he seems to think that when others do it, it's some great evil.
But let's say there's a religion that says flying planes into buildings is right. I'm not making that up. Is that right?
There's no religion that says that, sir.
Don't you remember 9/11? You were around, weren't you?
I was definitely around.
Don't you think that they were killing the infidels by flying those planes into the building?
Well,
don't you think that the Quran told them to do that? It's not some internet cell group that told them to do that. It's the Quran that told them.
If you talk to any Muslim, they'll say that terrorists have used their religion or have used religion to pervert their ideas.
And those Muslims are not adhering to the truth of the Quran. Because you're supposed to kill
Absolutely.
the infidels.
And you're not adhering to the truth of the Bible.
What is the truth of the Bible?
And the Lord discomfited them before Israel, and slew them with great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them along the way that goeth up to Bethron. The projection of Sai here is incredible, in that he sees that others killing for their religion is bad, but he thinks that those killed by the followers of his religion were actually dispensing an absolute justice when they engaged in this bloody slaughter.
Now, the more difficult problem is the children. How could God command that the children be killed because these are innocent?
I mean, even in the Bible, it's not God that picks up the sword and plunges it through the living flesh of children until they die from the extreme physical trauma. It's the believers that do that. It's the Sai and the Eric Hovens of their day.
Let me just tell you something. For hundreds and thousands of years, this kind of discussion would have been in most places impossible to have, or Sam and I would have been having it at the risk of our lives. Religion now comes to us in this smiley face, ingratiating way, because it's had to give so much ground, and because we know so much more. But you've no right to forget the way it behaved when it was strong, and when it really did believe that it had God on its side.
Tell me, Sai, if you had been part of Israel's army, slaughtering the children for God, what is the best way to kill a 10-year-old girl for God? A terrified 10-year-old shaking with fear at the blood-curdling screams of the other children being slaughtered, begging for her life, pleading to be spared, tears streaming down her cheeks, pleading not to be killed like her mom and dad, as mommy and daddy's blood drip from your sword. A child sobbing that I just want to live. Now, current leading Christian theologians.
We have the privilege to interview Dr. William Lane Craig, a first-rate intellectual that is regarded by many as one of the greatest defenders of the Christian faith of our time.
Are quite clear on this matter, that it would be absolutely immoral to spare the life of this child.
And I think you can make sense of this through a divine command morality, which says that our moral duties are constituted by God's commands, so that when He issues commands to us, these become our moral duties. Moreover, if you believe, as I do, in the salvation of infants or children who die, what that meant was that the death of these children meant their salvation. They were the recipients of an infinite good as a result of their earthly phase of life being terminated.
So really, anyone who endorses this sort of slaughter, as in the Bible, as a moral action,
there had to be another solution. The solution was to kill the children. And what did God do? What did he accomplish in doing so? Well, a military strategy that was successful.
Those who believe that killing a helpless child for your God is a moral act, indeed that you are blessing this child with an infinite good by terminating its earthly phase of life. Tell me, what is the absolutely moral, biblically correct way to slaughter a helpless child begging for her life? The moral standard that can only come from a biblical worldview.
I show that the basis of morality must be from the God of Scripture.
Would you stab her in the face? Would you cut her throat? Stab her in the side of the head? Stab it through the back? Disembowel her and let her die slowly? And after you've inflicted the mortal wounds and the life fades from her terrified eyes, do you feel joy knowing that in terminating this girl's earthly phase of life, you are blessing this girl with an infinite good? These are the actions of believers in the Bible. Actions supported and endorsed as absolutely moral, as proof that God exists because they're so absolutely moral, of modern Christian theologians. And when the terrified screams of the helpless children being massacred grew less, and eventually silence fell over the bloodbath, good, God-fearing men, full in the knowledge that whatever God said was just, with a smile on their face and a tune in their heart that they had delivered this infinite good to so many children, wiped the blood from their swords. If you can justify this as good, is there anything left to call evil?